Welcome back. All right, so I was looking through redrafts I've done on the channel. I was kind of surprised I haven't done one for 1995. So I felt like, all right, let's jump in the Wayback Machine, do the 1995 entry draft all over again 30 years later. Obviously, hindsight being 2020 and all that fun stuff. But it is 1 through 26 because there were 26 teams in the league at the time. This would be the last year for the Winnipeg Jets upcoming. This would be the first draft for the Colorado Avalanche, as the Quebec Nordiques were no more. So that's how far back we're looking here. So let's go ahead and jump in. Number 1, who gets drafted first? Well, it's got to be Jerome McIll. So Jerome McIll in this redraft would go to the Ottawa Senators. And I know there's Flames fans going, are you serious? But remember, he wasn't originally drafted by the Calgary Flames anyways. He was originally drafted 11th overall by Dallas. Dallas would trade Iginla in a deal that does, I think, help them win the 1999 Stanley Cup in getting Nieuwendyk in that trade. But long-term, Iginla would have looked great in Dallas. Just didn't happen. He goes to Calgary, but in this redraft, he is drafted by the Ottawa Senators, who I believe this was the first year they started wearing the jerseys with the white stripe in it. This is one thing I did mention when they switched back to this look is I did like that the white was in here after a while because it breaks up all of that black on the jersey. It's just all black. But anyways, number 2, drafted 2nd overall. So I mentioned this was the last draft for the Winnipeg Jets. And selecting 7th, they picked Shane Doan. In the redraft, Shane Doan goes to number 2. So Jerome McIll, Shane Doan to the New York Islanders. That would have been quite different. Interestingly enough, Brian Berard is originally drafted first by Ottawa, and Wade Redden is drafted 2nd by the Islanders, and then those players would be traded for one another. But yeah, it was quite the career for Doan, who gets drafted by Winnipeg, ends up playing in Arizona and all that fun stuff as well. And then, of course, Josh Doan ends up playing in Arizona, who then get moved to Utah. Basically, the idea is if your team drafts a player named Donne, you're probably getting moved. 3rd on the list, moving up from 116th. I hope I wrote this right. Pretty sure I did. Mika Kipper. Mika with 2 I's and 2 K's. Man, easy to mess that up. He was originally drafted 116th overall by the San Jose Sharks. This redraft features a lot of goaltenders. Just as a heads up, there are a lot of good goaltenders in the 1995 draft class. So Mika Kipper moves from 116th to 3rd. And he ends up being drafted by the LA Kings in this redraft instead of Aki Berg, who they drafted 3rd overall. So bit of an upgrade there from Aki Berg to Mika Kipper, who is going to become one of the best goaltenders during his time in Calgary. 4th on the list. I went through this redraft so many times. There we go. Moving up from 13th. Oh, this is interesting. So I do the redraft. I write it down on paper where everybody would go. And I don't consider who actually drafted in those positions until I'm doing the video. And here we are. J.S. Shagar would get drafted 4th by the Anaheim Ducks. That'd be easy, wouldn't it? Instead of getting drafted 13th overall by the Hartford Whalers, he gets drafted by the Ducks. He skips being in the Whalers organization, skips being in the Flames organization, and just goes straight to being a Duck. And I think that's kind of a good benefit there. So, as I said, this is a draft that does feature a lot of goaltenders in the redraft in the first round. J.S. Shagar at 4th. Of course, he would win a Stanley Cup. He wins a Conn Smythe. Not at the same time. The Conn Smythe he wins in a loss against New Jersey in the final. And then, of course, in 06, not 06, 07, the Ducks won. I can't take that cup away from the Carolina Hurricanes. 07, the Ducks win the Stanley Cup. At 5th in this redraft, dropping from 2. So Tampa in the redraft takes Wade Redden. When I'm deciding which drafts to do a redraft of, I have to consider like drafts that have a lot of stars. So if you're wondering why I've never done a redraft of 99 or 2000, those drafts are very light on star players, and I don't think a video with a redraft of that class would necessarily do all that well. But that being said, Wade Redden was drafted originally number 2 by the New York Islanders. In this redraft, he goes 5th to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that is the first defenseman off the board in this redraft. At 6th, not a defenseman, a forward this time around. Originally drafted 91st. I think with Mark Savard, I think he was drafted 91st because of his size. So it's not a new thing in the National Hockey League. Would have gone earlier if not. So in the redraft, he goes 6th to the Edmonton Oilers. Mark Savard, of course, tragically, his career ended up being a lot shorter than it should have been. And Mark Savard was a player that I liked, but I liked more and more as his career went along. And sadly, that career didn't go as long as it should have. So in the redraft, he goes 6th to the Edmonton Oilers, which is an interesting idea. I think they drafted Steve Kelly in the first round that year. I think Mark Savard would have been a little bit of an upgrade. And then at 7th, dropping from 5th, so originally drafted 5th by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Damon Lanau goes to the Winnipeg Jets at 7th in this redraft. Good forward, put up some really good numbers at times, and just a good solid top 6 option for a team at his peak. Lanau is an example of how there's some good players in this draft. Not necessarily huge superstars, but definitely some good players. And so, yeah, Lanau goes 7th in a redraft to the Winnipeg Jets in what would be their final draft before the move. And so that's why I'm using the old logo. I try to make sure when I'm doing the redrafts that I use logos that are similar, close to, or exactly what they used during that time period of that draft. At 8th, moving up from 18th. So another one who was a first rounder anyways, but in the redraft, he moves up from number 18 to number 8. And that's Peter Sakura, who would be an excellent forward for the New Jersey Devils. I did a career video on him, of course, a couple weeks ago, I do believe. Sakura, good player, good all-around, solid option up front. And there are some New Jersey fans that are watching this and saying, I don't like the idea of Peter Sakura being in the Montreal Canadiens. Don't worry, I don't change history with redrafts. It's just like when I'm doing videos on who I think are the best players. It doesn't actually have an impact on the players. Guarantee Jake Sanderson didn't watch the defenseman video going, well, that's it, I give up. I'm not in the top 20, I give up. Nah, he's off water skiing or something. Anyways, because unlike me, hockey players, they have a summer. 9th, knowing that they all keep working out during the offseason, which is a little different than things used to be. At 9th on the list, and keeping in mind here that I did scratch out and move guys around and everything, moving up from 10th. So originally drafted 10th. In the redraft, he goes 9th. So right around the right spot, actually. Oh, if only I could spell. But if I could spell, I wouldn't be the hockey guy. I have said for years, this dates back to, I think it was 2017, was the first time I said, if there's not an error somewhere on the board, be concerned, because that means something's happened. It's not good. But Radek Dvorak, I finally got that spelled, moves up from number 10 to number 9 in the redraft. Dvorak, good, solid all-around option for any team during his peak, and so Boston drafts him at 9th. In this redraft, another pretty solid all-around option. So we're into number 10 now as we finish the top 10. That's a better way of saying it. We finished the top 10. And it's another goalie who was originally drafted 16th by Buffalo. And it's Marty Bon. So this is an odd draft in that J.S. Shagar and Marty Bon were both drafted in the first round. It is odd for goaltenders to get drafted in the first round. I have meant to do a video for a long time on whether or not it's worth drafting goalies in the first round. My answer to that is yes. If they're a very good goaltender, absolutely. I don't have a problem with the team utilizing a first-round draft pick on a goaltender. And in the case of Biron, Jaguar, and if somebody somewhere had said, hey, this Kipper kid's going to be fantastic, they would look like a genius after. The tricky part becomes that, yes, there are also plenty of examples of first-round goaltenders that have not panned out, and teams have looked bad for drafting a goaltender early, so it really can go either way. Number 11 in the draft, as Dallas is now up, and moving up from 49th, So Dallas now takes Yoken Hesh. Or Yoken Hecht. I've heard it both ways. Yoken Hesh. So forward goes to the Dallas Stars. It's not Jerome McIll. It's interesting, though, because Jerome McIll really didn't play for Dallas. So would drafting Hesh have been an awful idea? Yes, because then they couldn't have made the trade to get Joe Nieuwendyk. So I don't think Hesh would have had the interest from the Calgary Flames that McGinley did in that trade. So no offense to him or anything, but McGinley's number one on the board for a reason. So Hesh going 11th, and he's a German player, right? A little bit ahead of his time, wasn't he? 12th on the list. Moving up from number 101. So San Jose takes a player who wasn't taken until much later in the draft. So officially, by my standard, Michael Handzus would have been a steal in that draft at 101. Anybody who's taken outside the top 100, makes the NHL, and has a good career, that to me is an absolute steal. So Handzus moves up from 101st to 12th. He goes to San Jose in the redraft. Another forward. So what are the numbers here? Forward, goaltender, defenseman, forward, goaltender, forward. It's not a great crop of defensemen, is it? Although you do have Wade Redden in there, was pretty darn good. 13th on the list. Is this a goal? It's a goaltender. It's not a defenseman. It's a goaltender. So Hartford takes a goaltender anyways. And this is another goalie who went in the first round that year. He was drafted 22nd overall by the Philadelphia Flyers, and that's Brian Boucher. Yes, that Brian Boucher, the one that you see on TV regularly on the American side of the border, and also in Canada on those nationwide broadcasts they put up here as well. Boucher, very good goaltender. Famously, a nice long shutout streak that gets brought up often on TV. And I get why. I totally understand why it gets brought up as often as it does. Because what was it? 5 shutouts in a row? Something ridiculous? It was just crazy. There was some luck involved, sure. But Boucher was a pretty darn good goaltender at his peak as well. Which brings us to 14th on the list. Moving up from 164th. And so this goes to the Buffalo Sabres. Number 164 that year was Stefan Robida. And so in the redraft, Stefan Robida goes to Buffalo. Long before he was known as, Robida Island in Toronto, right? Where he's off on his own. The LTIR, get out of here, go away, leave the team alone. But yeah, Robida, pretty good defenseman. So there's finally a defenseman to go with Wade Redden. So that's 2 defensemen in the top 14. And yeah, Robida had a pretty good career himself. Not stellar, and there's a lot of players that aren't stellar once you get out of that first few, but hey, still pretty good career nonetheless. 15th on the list. Man, I really changed this a lot. So moving up from 25th. So another goaltender who was taken in the first round that year. And he was the first draft pick of the Colorado Avalanche. That's Marc Denis, who now becomes a Toronto Maple Leaf, drafted at 15th. Marc Denis was a good goaltender. Then he ended up going to Columbus, as Columbus is an expansion team, and it didn't go well for him from there. But Denis did have some good numbers. I understood why Columbus grabbed him in the expansion draft. And I saw the vision. It just, in the end, it didn't quite work out. But Denis still had a pretty good career. Good enough that I felt like 15th was a good spot for him. So you guys can let me know your thoughts as always, but that's where I have Denis. At 16th, moving down from 14th, another defenseman. Hey, look at that. Buffalo still drafts him. That's neat. Like I said, I don't plan it out that way. Like, oh, this team has to draft this guy. And so Jay McKee goes 16th from 14th. That 14th pick, that was the Vancouver Canucks draft pick that Buffalo had, because the Canucks have been trading first-round draft picks for a long time. And Jay McKee was that lost pick. And now he's still a Buffalo Sabres. He goes at 16th rather than 14th. The Sabres, pretty good team at this point in time, because Hasek makes them a pretty good team. But yeah, so 16th for Jay McKee. Hasek was there in 95, right? It's fine. It's fine. I'm pretty sure... Yeah, he'd have to have been, right? Because he was in Chicago, and then Chicago traded him for like $1, and yeah. Anyways, not for much. Yeah, the price to get Hasek was very, very little. Basically, Chicago was like, hey, we got Ed Belfour. We don't need another goalie. This Hasek guy, he's on the older side. We'll just get rid of him. And they got rid of him. It was weird. Because a lot of us were quite enamored with what we thought he'd be able to do, even though we couldn't figure out how he did any of it. All right, number 17 on the list before we get too off into Hasek territory. Moving up. Yeah, moving up from 192nd. Another defenseman. So moving up from 192nd to 17th. And taken now by the Washington Capitals, Phipe Kuba. Kuba, good career. Solid defenseman. Top 4 defenseman at points during that career. And so I felt like 17th was a good spot for him. Between McKee and Kuba, I picked McKee, but if you want to say Kuba would have gone earlier, you can go in that direction if you'd like. At 18th, moving up from 87th, I do believe this player has a member of his family who's currently in the NHL, doesn't he? Sammy Kapan, who was originally drafted 87th overall. Now in the redraft, he goes 18th to the New Jersey Devils. So Devils fan, does that make up for losing Sakura? Of course it doesn't. That's why Sakura's 8th and Kapanen's 18th. But I mean, hey, NHL player, decent career and all that. And yeah, Sammy Kapanen. I'm trying to think. I think Sammy's Kasperi's dad, right? Kasperi Kapanen? Anyways. All right. Number 19. This is why I always get names mixed up, because I'm old enough to remember when dads have played. So sometimes when I'm doing videos, I will let the dad's name spill out. Tkachuk is a famous example. Keith Tkachuk's name comes out of my mouth way more often involving current hockey than it should, because it'll just slip out. Because Tkachuk, I think Keith. 19th. And all the young kids that are laughing right now, you wait. It'll happen to you guys too. 19th. Dropping from 9th. So originally, Kyle McLaren is taken 9th overall by the Boston Bruins. And I was excited. And honestly, Kyle McLaren started off really pretty damn good for the Boston Bruins. Just didn't stay at that level. And so for me on the redraft, I have Kyle McLaren going 19th. It's too bad too. Kyle McLaren was quite good for a while there. But overall, when I'm looking at their careers, I do feel like 19th is the right spot for Kyle to be. But since I have McLarens in my family, I was rooting for the kid when he got drafted. I was like, hey, McLaren's cool. Number 20. So 20th on the list goes to, there we are, dropping from first. So another defenseman. See, the defensemen show up just late. Brian Berard. Number one reason why when Bedard came into the NHL, I kept calling him Berard is because of Brian Berard. Now there's a Brett Berard, so that's mean. Now, Brian Berard would be much higher on this list if not for the eye injury. The eye injury basically made him blind in one eye, and so it became very difficult for him to play defense as well as he had. The offense he was still able to figure out. He still produced all right. The defensive side of his game was definitely negatively impacted, as it would be. But Berard, the fact he kept playing after the eye injury was kind of remarkable. And so he does drop down to number 20, but he's still in the first round, even after the eye injury. All right, number 21 on the list. There we are. Moving up from 122nd. And it's another goaltender. Because of course it is. And this is another one you may recognize from TV. If you are a Nashville Predator TV watcher, Chris Mason goes 21st in this to the Boston Bruins. Rather than 122nd where he went originally. Chris Mason, good goaltender. Back up through a lot of his career too. But yeah, Chris Mason had some good years there. And so I felt like 21st was a good spot for him. So, again, you guys can let me know your thoughts on that. Then, not to be confused with Steve Mason. Steve Mason was the Columbus goaltender years later. I do wonder how many times I've mixed those up over the years before I had a channel. Definitely mixed things up before I had a channel. 22nd, Up from 177th and not quite taken by the Boston Bruins, who I believe took him at 177th originally. And that's PJ Axelson. PJ Axelson, decent bottom six forward. I know that there's an ongoing request for me to do a PJ Axelson career video. There's not a lot there, though. Like, when people ask for a career video, I'm very open-minded, but I have to look at that career and say, okay, how much is there here for me to talk about? And sometimes there's not that much there. So PJ Axelson goes 22nd and had a decent National Hockey League career, mostly as a bottom six forward. So we're down to 23rd, moving up from 144th. We talk a lot about players chewing on their mouth guards. And the first player I remember doing it all the time was Brent Soapil. That was kind of a thing. And it bothered me because it's like, look, if you're going to just chew on the mouth guard rather than actually putting it in your mouth, it's probably not guarding anything. Then it's just a mouth chew. And I do feel like Brent Soapil started that. And yes, players would just knock it out of his mouth because it's what you do. Now, chewing on the mouth guard is just, it's standard. Everybody does it. Just chew on the mouth guard. And it still looks gross. Just to hockey players everywhere, it still looks disgusting. It's kind of gross. Yeah, it kind of looks like you're chewing on a retainer. Like, it's nah. And I feel like that started with Brent Soapil. But outside of that, Soapil was a decent defenseman, had a good career. Played in Vancouver on 2 different occasions. And I liked Soapil more the first time than the second time. Second time, I have to say there were definitely some issues with this game there. Totally understood why the Canucks didn't keep him around past how long they did. But, yeah, I liked Soapil. 24th on the list. Moving up from number 90. It's another goaltender. It's the invasion of the goaltenders here. So, Vesa Toskala is remembered for, and he moves up from number 90, as I said. Originally a draft pick of San Jose. So the Sharks drafted Kipper and Toskala that year, and Kipper they drafted after Toskala. Yet they got praised for how genius they were for picking Kipper. If they were genius, they would have picked Kipper and then Toskala. But Toskala was a decent goaltender. He is remembered during his time in Toronto for unflattering goals against and for unflattering numbers. But I liked Toskala, and then it just all fell apart. And that's the tricky part with goaltenders, is that they can start off well and then things kind of fall apart later. But I did feel like Toskala's career was enough that, yeah, he belonged in the first round of this redraft. 25th, dropping from 4th. So he was originally drafted by Anaheim 4th. Big forward. As I remember, Chad Kilgar was a big forward. And it just didn't quite work out at the NHL level for him. At least it didn't work out well enough to have him any higher than 25th on this redraft for me personally. As the hockey guy, as a hockey fan. And so yeah, Kilgar going 25th means we only have one left. And moving up from 128th. Another forward. So Kilgar's a forward. And moving up from 128th to 26th is Jan Hrdina, also a forward. Which means that the honorable mention goes to Georges Laraque. Georges Laraque was originally drafted 31st, meaning that if there was a 27th on the board, Georges Laraque might have gone 27th in the redraft. Laraque was in the league for a while and relatively productive for the role that he had. But Jan Hrdina gets this spot at 26th. And he's a player, too, that I thought started well. There was a lot of promise there, and it didn't quite work out for him. But Hrdina, to me, still belongs in the first round of this redraft. So just before we finish this year, how many goalies are there? Kiprusoff, Shagar, Biron, Boucher, Denise. I'm not counting them. Let me go back and count them. Name them all off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 goaltenders in the first round out of 26 picks. Because there were that many good goaltenders in the draft. Not because it was a particularly weak draft. So there you go. My first ever redraft of the 1995 NHL draft. I could try 99 or 2000. I could try. But I don't know that... A, I don't know how well that would perform. And B, I think once you get past about the 5th or 6th pick, it's so I went with this guy because sure, why not? But anyways, there you go. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. Hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys for everything as the summer rolls along. We're up to August 5th as I'm recording this, and we have about 6 weeks left till training camp. So I do enjoy the redrafts though. Thank you guys so much for your support. I will talk to you again soon.